All right, co-chairs are all assembled. Do you guys want to give it a couple minutes, or do you want to get started right at 6:30?
I think we can wait a couple of minutes.
Okay, sounds good. Sharon, you just need to unmute.
Oh, yeah. Thanks. Yeah, we'll just give it a minute or two. That's okay with Anthony and Elizabeth as well.
And I think, I know that Elizabeth knows this, but Kevin is on a much deserved vacation. And so you get stuck with me tonight. So I hope that is all right.
Yay!
I think we can bear it.
Oh, thank you guys. Would you like me to go ahead and give the pre-meeting talking points?
Let's do that.
Good idea.
All right. Well, welcome everybody who's here already. If this is your first time joining us for one of our virtual committee meetings, or maybe the first time in a long time, we're excited to have you. A few rules of the road as we go through the meeting, just to help with the order and flow of the meeting. So you'll notice right now that everyone is muted except for our co-chairs, Elizabeth, Anthony, and Sharon. As we move through the agenda, we will engage members of the public who wish to speak. You can participate by going to the reactions icon on your screen or your device and pressing the raise hand button. Do not press it multiple times, because if you press it a second time, your hand will go back down. And it's not the wave or the thumbs up button, it's the button that says raise hand. If you're calling in from the phone, it's *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute. And then be on the lookout for a prompt asking you to confirm unmuting once one of the co-chairs calls on you. If you're having problems, the chat is available for technical support. It is only for technical support to help with the Zoom software. It is not to ask questions of the co-chairs or make comments to the co-chairs. They will never see those chats. I'm the only one who will ever see the chats. If you're using an older version of Zoom, you'll need to go to the participants section where you'll find the raise hand feature there. And finally, we encourage you not to raise your actual hand or wave at the screen to get attention. If you're having problems, chat me. I'm here for support. And with that, I can hand it back over to our co-chairs. And if they're ready to get started, we can get going.
Thank you so much. And that was Will Brightfield, who is the district manager for Community Board 8. Yes. My name is Sharon Pope Marshall, and I'd like to introduce myself to you as a co-chair of the Zoning and Development Committee. I have the pleasure of also co-chairing this committee with Anthony Cohn as well as Elizabeth Ashby. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. If you're here for the Blood Center and the Zoning and Development Committee, you're in the right place. And also, I encourage you to attend our full board meetings as well. And with that, I'd like to move the agenda and get started with Elizabeth Ashby.
Good evening, and thanks a lot, Sharon. I just have a few words to make sure that people know the score here. The statement from the Blood Center, which is the only item on the agenda, I'll read just 2 lines for that. And this was a plan that came out a couple of years ago, and we're discussing what's happening as a result of a purchase in Westchester. And they say the first thing, they said the project plan has not changed. 2025 is the earliest construction would begin. It would take roughly 3 years to complete. And they also say NYBC, New York Blood Center's headquarters, will continue to be housed at Center East, and that's the 67th Street site. And then, just so you know where the community board stands, we have had 2 resolutions and 2 resolved clauses I will read to you so that you know where we stand. The 2 are, therefore, be it resolved that Community Board 8N opposes the request for all of the zoning changes outlined in our resolution and requested by the applicant, that's the Blood Center. And therefore, be it further resolved, the Community Board 8 disapproves the application and urges that it be rejected. So that's where we stand. And I think Anthony is going to fill us in on the Westchester.
Yes, we got well, the only word is, we were alerted pretty publicly, and on June 27th, New York YIMBY published a little article that said that the New York Blood Center had purchased, I don't know if they bought it actually, now that I said that, purchased or are leasing, I believe they just leased, a 187,000 square feet in Rye that was formerly a building owned by Avon that was in fact empty. And they're going to completely they're going to gut the building, and the point of it from their point of view is to accommodate all of their and consolidate all of their non-Manhattan activities, or largely consolidate their non-Manhattan activities, and to use that in Rye as the swing space for the during the construction of their Manhattan building. And I'm just going to read, they said, Elizabeth read the beginning of their statement. I think it's worth reading aloud the balance of it. The Rye campus houses different operations for New York Blood Center and combines multiple properties into one campus. In the tri-state area, the New York Blood Center has four major properties. Their Long Island City location, which holds their manufacturing and distribution lease, expired with no opportunity to renew. Their search for a single campus began more than 7 years ago. The Westchester campus combines several existing locations throughout the area that focus on blood processing and distribution. These are not functions that are performed at Center East, nor have ever been performed at Center East. The Westchester space will be used as a temporary swing space for employees from Center East while that building is under construction. So that's sort of the meat of the statement and what they apparently or supposedly intend to do. And I think I've lost my agenda, but I think that we can, there was one other piece of this that was kind of interesting that has come to light recently, which was a restrictive declaration for the property, which we have, and the most important part of that is that the property can only be used for, I think the way that it was described was it can only be used for medical purposes, medical research purposes. Did you say something, Elizabeth? No? Okay. Can only be used for medical research purposes, although not necessarily just for by the blood center. So I think that brings us sort of up to date, and I suspect that there are members of the public who would like to speak. There's a restrictive declaration in the chat. It's only 27 pages long, but the meat of it is sort of at the front end. So if people, members of the public would like to, I see we have one. If members of the public want to sort of queue up, please do. All right, first we have Erica.
And this is just a friendly reminder, everyone. If you would like to make a comment, ask a question, go to the reactions icon and press the raise hand button, and that's how you'll be recognized.
Hi, Anthony. Thank you. I just have one question. What is the purpose of this meeting if nothing has changed from 67th Street?
Well, I think one of the, yes, good point.
Just simply, like in a couple of bullets. I just don't understand.
Yeah. I think opponents of the project have felt for some time that the blood center was acting at least some partially in bad faith.
100%.
Okay. And so this revelation that they are building 187,000 square foot or building out 187,000 square foot building, which would more than accommodate the functions in Manhattan. It remains to be seen. And one thing that occurred to me actually 15 minutes ago, and I don't know the answer, is did they ever tell us when they plan to start a long time, in 2020 or 2021? When did they tell us they plan to start construction? 2025 is a long way off even now. And we have a situation where I think nobody quite, and sad to say, nobody quite trusts them, or at least their real estate intentions. And so that's why we're here, to have a conversation about it. And it can be brief or long.
I've worked in life sciences for 30 years.
If I could just add as well, is that part of our responsibility as community board members is to do two things. One is to keep the community appraised as to what's happening. And sometimes irrespective of whether or not there are significant changes, and also because of the impact of this particular proposal on Community Board 8 was so substantial that we thought that it would be extremely helpful to the community overall to continue the conversation within this forum.
And Sharon, just
I appreciate
really quickly,
that.
Sharon, before you keep speaking, it's really hard to hear you. If you have something sitting on top of your laptop, maybe some papers or something that are maybe on top of your microphone, that's what it sounds like.
Okay.
I've worked in the life sciences field for nearly 30 years, including at New York Press, Weill Cornell. And to say that the New York Blood Center was disingenuous throughout this whole thing would be an understatement. So I definitely appreciate keeping the public abreast of it, but they cannot be trusted after what they did to our community.
Yes, thank you, Erica. And then I think we next have Marty Bell.
Thank you, Anthony. And before getting to the point I wanted to make, just for Erica's information, the knowledge of their activities in Westchester came to light a couple of weeks ago in June, and it was only yesterday. So there was a big question. Does that mean they're not going to be on 67th or partially? It was only yesterday that their lobbyist wrote to the community board CB8 saying that they intend to keep the headquarters there. My question is sort of twofold. As I just said, they said they're keeping the headquarters there. In their presentation, they made it, they represented there are about 230 workers there, and they take about 200,000 or something less than that, 185,000 square feet. Erica, like you, I've been involved in life sciences for several decades. I'm general counsel to a company called ICW Healthcare that's at 641 Lexington Avenue, 13th floor. We've raised 20 some odd $1 million. We're funding research at MIT and Mayo Clinic. And no one from the company has ever been to Lexington Avenue. That's our headquarters for agreements, but it's a mail drop. And they send me they open the mail and send me a PDF of the mail when anything gets there. So when they say there's a headquarters going to be there, I think we need some clarity both as to space and workers, or is it going to be a mail drop such as ICW's headquarters on 641 Lexington Avenue? And the second thing, the article that I read in Patch several weeks ago where they talked about it, I think they mentioned the Lindsay F. Kimball Research Institute 4 or 5 times in connection with that location in Westchester. People who were involved with the blood center review and Euler process remember it was sort of a house of cards, but it was all built on the fact that their researchers had to be within, it was called the close proximity. In fact, their lawyer at their first meeting of the zoning committee said, not just walking distance, short walking distance. I found that the other day when I was looking, and it's a much bigger walking distance from Westchester to New York Hospital than from 67th Street. So their whole premise was based on they have to stay there. They showed this chart with arrows from the blood center and 6 different projects with each of those. And one time Hillier said, we go back and forth every day. So that was the whole premise. And it was because they had to stay there. And then because they couldn't afford it, that's why you got the tower on top of it. So if the researchers aren't staying there, the whole house of cards falls. So those are my questions. Are the researchers there, and what do they mean when they say headquarters in terms of employees and space? One other thing, I don't know if it's proper, Anthony, for you or someone to ask. The blood center said they couldn't attend. There are a bunch of names on the screen. Would it be okay to ask anyone to identify if they're either from the blood center Longfellow or their attorney's offices?
Yeah, I don't see why not. I don't.
Feel free to chat me if you're, here as a representative of the blood center. And just to clarify a couple of points that were procedural in nature of your conversation. One, they were invited last week, so it was a very last minute notice that they were invited. 2, we always invite people through their representatives. Yes, those people are called paid lobbyists, but those are their representatives. So it's not as if I would expect to receive as a public employee who invites somebody to receive something from somebody who I did not send an invitation to. So that is why we received the statement from their quote unquote lobbyist.
Thank you.
3, we actually technically received their response on Friday, so which is not yesterday, and I didn't actually post their response to anywhere, until I was able to get back into the office yesterday, and that's where I sent it to our co-chairs.
Right.
Just some clarifying points.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Okay. Thank you, Marty. And it looks as though we now have Michelle. Oh, wait a minute. There's another member of the public, Michelle.
Yeah. Leah, if you don't mind identifying yourself so that we know who you are.
Yes, it's Leah Hanlon. Just if you could refresh me. My recollection was that the tower with all of the additional space built on top of their offices could be used for lots of different purposes, not even necessarily medical. And I would assume, perhaps you can correct me, that even if it turns out that they're moving entirely to Westchester, that the tower still has its permissions and it can go up and they can use it for whatever.
No, let me see. Let me find the, here it is. Okay, the restrictive declaration says that it is for entities in the health medical field, and it does not, but it does not require that the blood center specifically occupy that space. So, you know, it's kind of half a loaf, but at least it's not a commercial office building, which would in fact be allowed by the zoning. So,
but anything loosely related to healthcare.
Yes.
And this
It's
is
the C27, commercial too.
And the fact that they are, if theoretically they were to move themselves to Westchester, that would not change the building on 67th Street.
No, unfortunately, it would not.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now we have Michelle.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, those were all my questions as well. But in addition, is Longfellow still involved?
Apparently, their website used to have, they have their website at their sort of current and future projects portion of their website, had the blood center, was Center East, prominently featured in their projects area. It's now been moved to something that they call case studies, which includes buildings that are completed and buildings that are imagined or under construction. So it's a little unclear to me why it's not in with the rest of their projects. But they, again, appear to still be involved as the I guess the partner and major tenant.
Yeah, well, they were the renters of the upper floors.
Right.
And they were the financiers of that expansion. And it was the expansion of the extra square footage of the blood center that satisfied the blood center's needs, excuse me, which we all claimed they could have gotten as of right without the tower. Now we don't know. Well, I don't know if any of this conversation, aside from being informative, can we go back and amend anything? Because a lot of their statements have been proven false or, let's say, misleading. And in terms of Longfellow, where the upper building was supposed to have some kind of medical affiliation, I remember conversations where we said that theoretically, depending how you define it, you could end up with condos. Now, that would not be a terrible thing in terms of use, but in terms of height, about 30 stories by normal calculation of height, it's still too big and too bulky for the mid-block. But is there any thing or any statement that anybody's made that would give us entree to going back? I suppose that may need a look by a legal team, which we don't have. But is there anywhere to go here? The fact that Longfellow moved that, I don't know what their categories mean. So of course we don't know what they meant by moving it, but clearly it indicates a change. So it indicates some kind of a change with Longfellow's affiliation to that building. And then the question is, the blood center not having 50 cents to build 2 extra stories, where'd they get the money to buy this Rye building? So do we know any of the internals here, the circulars, who's involved, who's financing, who's not financing? Do we know anything that could shed some light?
No, we don't. This came up really very recently. The one thing, what we are doing is that we are going to, I think, write a letter in which we express our concern and that there are things happening on this project that seem inconsistent with the requests that were made and voted on by the city council in 2021 and at the end of 2021. And I think that it also is not a it's not completely out of line for us to ask why it's taking so long. Yeah, it's only going to take 3 years to build, but they're not starting it for 4 years until 4 years after they got permission.
The longer they take, the better in terms of starting. But the question, who will you write this letter to?
I think we're planning on sending it to all the appropriate elected officials, city and state.
So then we can ask them to look into the affiliations, the needs, and whether or not the variances and the zoning changes were granted with appropriate information, accurate, truthful, appropriate information. Can we?
Yeah, or that if go ahead.
No, I was just say, can we frame it in a way that where suspect finances were represented to us in a certain way and to the elected officials, and you know, how are they financing this building? They didn't have money for that. What role is Longfellow playing? Is there another developer here? You know, can we ask all those questions? Do we have the right to know? And will it open up some kind of doubt or investigation or concern with the elected officials? And frankly, considering all the elected officials sided with our position, they should be very, very interested in this. And in that letter, I would suggest that you remind them of that. They spoke at the rally in front of the center.
Yep.
They were very forceful. And the fact that they took that position, they should be equally annoyed is a light word to say that, you know, things have been confusing. We don't know what's happening. But frankly, what's happening in Westchester is not our business really, although we need to know on background. But I want to know where that 67th Street project really stands, who's supporting it, who's financing it, and who's going to end up there. And you know, what
I think one of the things that is kind of amusing is that they needed to build this tower on top of it because they couldn't afford it, but somehow, somewhere, they can build a 187,000 square foot
in Rye
building in Chester. So, I mean, construction costs aren't that much less in Westchester than they are in Manhattan. I think that what you're bringing up and what Anthony is pointing out really is the justifications for this is one of the biggest zoning changes and most destructive zoning changes that we quite rightly turned down and come along. And the justifications for it seem to be slipping away. And I think, I don't know if that is enough, but I certainly is enough to write to those in power and those who made this terrible mistake in the first place to reconsider and see what they can do to reverse this huge and destructive zoning change.
Yeah, that was also my point, Elizabeth, that in such an inquiry letter, we should ask them specifically, because it's always good to have an ask, that if they can, if they find enough misrepresentation, if the request could be reversed, if the accommodations that they gave could be reversed, or at least open to a hearing or discussion.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Next we have Valerie.
Thanks. I mean, this is a cautionary tale. That's all it is. It's nothing more or less than what we originally thought it was. And I don't think there's any, we can write all the letters we want. The way the restrictive deed was formulated was not the way we wanted it to be. We tried very hard to say that if the blood center didn't occupy the full 7 floors or whatever the first 5 floors or 3 floors, then they would lose their right to have the building. I think everyone recalls how they kept saying, "Oh, we've got to get in the ground. We've got to get in the ground. You know, it's got to happen right away." I mean, if you look at the date on the restrictive deed, it's from November of 2021. I guess my question is, where's all the other crap that they promised us? Where's the money for the park? Where's the, you know, where are the internships for the kids at the high school? You know, they should at least come before the community board and tell us where all those things are. And I think that we would be well within our rights. I mean, that's not really a zoning issue, but they made all these promises. And the only weapon I think we have here is that if they ever come before any other agency or community board or wherever they are, that they in fact are not truth tellers and they do not act in good faith. And unfortunately, that doesn't really distinguish them from a lot of other people that have come before us. But it should be a real cautionary tale to the elected officials who so easily bought their BS and were willing to support it. And the fact that they're building in Westchester, I mean, who knows? They may have a grant from, you know, the local government there to have all the jobs there. And, you know, we didn't say corporate headquarters means that you have to have, you know, 75 people working there full time or anything like that. And when I say we, I mean the people who were in the room negotiating it, for the most part, none of whom are elected officials in the capacities they were at the time that this terrible agreement was put in place. I think it's also a cautionary tale about the move away from member deference and for communities to decide what belongs in their own backyard. And right now, it's almost no different than the conditions were in 2021. We had like over 100 million square feet of unoccupied, Adam can check me on the numbers, of commercial space that was unoccupied. And yet the city was so willing to give the largest tax break in the history of New York City to Longfellow Development, over $500 million. And today, the City Planning Commission is worried about how are they going to convert all the empty office space that's in Midtown to good use. So, I mean, it's just, it's unfortunate. It was just another example of how money and power and real estate wins the day.
Thank you, Valerie. We have someone on the phone, Margaret, and if you would identify yourself.
Hi, Anthony. It's Maggie. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, of course.
Oh, good. Actually, there. You can hear me fine?
Yes.
Thanks. Good. So, I obviously agree with Michelle and with Valerie. What was not revealed and where they're getting the money to build this huge project in Westchester, southern Westchester, no less, which is the wealthiest part of Westchester. And they're going to have 1,000 employees there. It was never revealed to any of us or any of the hearings, to city planning or to city council that the lease that they had in Long Island City was due imminently. We saw in the letter that Kassir sent to Will, to Community Board 8, that they can't renew that lease. We were never told that. I'm not even sure I was aware that that was leased in Long Island City. I thought they owned it. But that just could be something I missed. We certainly didn't know the lease was going to expire in 2 years. And as Anthony Barrett had pointed out, in all the different sites they listed they were looking at, they never once mentioned Westchester. I think that a letter is necessary for the reasons, Anthony, that you said, Michelle, Valerie, that you all said, but I would strongly request and advise that there not be a reference to why is it taking so long. Not only do I agree with Michelle, the longer the better. We're in no hurry for this. But who knows, what will happen and what might be changed and what might come up and what we might reveal. So I think a letter should be focused on the refocus on the lack of transparency that we kept harping on and drilling down on and got nowhere, and yet look what's happened now. I also would remind everyone that the Speaker of the City Council today was one of the loudest voices as proponents for this new building, Adrienne Adams. She was very opposed to the community's resistance and very pro this development. Per what Valerie said, what about all the stuff they promised us? Let's also remember not only what about the money to the park, but there were also, wasn't there a couple of million, $2.5, $3 million that was going to the school? So those are my comments, and thanks for giving me time.
Thank you. I think just on the sort of Long Island City point, I remember distinctly, because I asked the question, I remember distinctly asking what they were doing for swing space, and the answer was Long Island City. So clearly,
Yes.
yeah, so clearly they knew they weren't going to Long Island City as a swing space, and but they did not actually reveal that they were going to someplace else, even if they didn't know it was going to be in Westchester at the time. So thanks a lot. And now we have on the phone Leah.
I'm not on the phone.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you for taking me again. Just one observation and one question. The observation is the community board should probably figure out whether this Westchester thing is really going forward, because I think you're basing this on a YIMBY article, which I haven't seen, but that's just an observation. My question is, if they were building a big giant space in Westchester, I guess in an existing empty building,
Mm-hmm.
What would that do to all of those construction jobs that were so instrumental in getting giving them the support they needed on the city council to get the permissions they did?
Well, there's a picture of a whole bunch of guys with shovels in the article, so I have to presume that they're actually serious about it.
Yeah, but there's I mean, renovating an old Avon building is not the same as building a giant skyscraper. Although the skyscraper would still go up, so the construction people would be happy.
Right. Okay. Next we have Faith Frazier.
Hi, Anthony. It's Faith Fraser. I was just going to reference that same article that you see with the picture of all the guys at the groundbreaking, and mention that Gillibrand and Schumer and other elected officials are all quoted in there as being in support of it.
Okay.
And it's dated,
I
I think that's from City Biz, June 16th, right?
Yeah, no, I
There's a
see
picture with
something
the
a little
guys.
later, 27th, June 27th,
Okay.
but the guys with the shovels do not include either of our senators.
But they are
Thank you.
referenced, quoted further in the article.
Yeah,
And I have. Thank you. And I echo all what Valerie and everyone else has said. Very disappointed in the whole thing. Thank you.
thank you. Elaine Walsh.
Good evening. Sorry I'm joining you late and may have missed a lot of the conversation, but my question continues to be, I have never seen the final legal papers on the site. And I know I was very adamant about a sunset clause and a limitation that if the Blood Center did not build on 67th Street or Longfellow, that it reverted to R8B. Anybody know about that? Because I am concerned we got a land swap here. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know offhand, but that's something we can certainly try and find out. Okay, I'm going to turn my microphone, metaphorically, over to Elizabeth.
Well, have we heard from all the? I think
Yeah.
we're missing we're missing a bit of information, and I think we probably write to city planning and the mayor. But I think that I would welcome everybody's comments if they would send them to the office if they're not members of the board. And I think that we should make the point that this was allowed to them because of the great benefit to the community and the impossibility for the Blood Center to do it any other way. I think we can work on developing our points there. I think also, this is I think a city problem. The city has a terrible failure of looking at the consequences of things. There are a whole lot of wonderful things that one supports, like healthcare and affordable housing and so on. But then when you come up with a solution and you say you achieve it, you just don't look. I mean, they might as well. We need good factory union jobs, but that doesn't mean we put a munitions factory in the middle of Central Park. But their thinking is pretty well at that level. You say, oh, this is wonderful, we've got a factory, and how, we'll put 6 affordable housing towers in Prospect Park or something like that. We own the land. Good Lord, a great idea. So I think that this decision comes in that category, an extreme one. So I just think we've got to think about this letter. I'm not certainly at this stage informed enough. I don't know enough about what's going on in Westchester. And when I looked at what they were proposing to do. Although the blood center says, you know, they're not doing the same thing as the 67th Street. They both were doing a research, and they both were doing collecting blood and so on. So there is a great similarity there. So I think it's going to take some study and I think there are those in the members of the public who have done a lot of studies and fought very hard, and so their contributions, I think, should be very welcome. And then perhaps the three co-chairs can work on a letter and maybe bring it back soon. But thank goodness they're not going to be building for a couple of years. So we have time to do it right and to get the information. So that would be my suggestion.
Oh, Margaret Price.
Hi, thanks. I just want to also point out that from the article I just read, it appears that hiring and employment is quite an issue that we should point out to our elected officials. The article I read said that this Westchester office is being used as office space for personnel in administration, as well as scientific research and improvements in transfusion and cell understanding, as well as a blood donor service. Now, why aren't these jobs going to New York City? Why are they going to Westchester? What are we losing scientific know-how here in the city to the suburbs? I really think that the employment issue should be part and parcel of the complaint, if you will. Anyway, I'm sorry, that's all.
Great, thank you. Oh, I see Michelle is back.
Yeah, I think we have to be very careful in this letter because we don't want to we don't want to make the argument for them that they need to stay here on 67th Street in the expansive way they propose. I'm happy to have them on 67th Street with an as-of-right building that would give them an additional 2 stories. But I want to be very careful that we don't complain to them about how we want the construction jobs or the office jobs. I think the thrust of our point is that they were granted variances and courtesies that were given to them based on warrants that they made to us, which do not appear to be true. And so the thrust of our request would be for the zoning to revert back or be converted as Elizabeth suggests. But they don't seem to be saying that they're giving up this site. So they seem to have this site. But I would say that building on top of it seems to be very questionable at this point. Mainly because Longfellow moved it from one column to another, although we don't know quite what that means, but they did move it in their internal papers. And also because based on who or how they're getting financing for Rye, it doesn't sound like there would be a lot of money left over to do the building here. So I see this as an opportunity to focus on the fact that they do not need to expand here, that if they go back and listen to the tapes, or we can even send in our minutes, we can attach our resolutions to say that everything they warranted in order to get this information, in order to get these variances was not true. And we want to go back to the drawing board and look at the rationale or the legalities I don't know, an attorney would have to look at this. We have a couple of land use attorneys on board. Maybe they'd be happy to take a look. But that would, to me, would be the thrust of the letter. And maybe the co-chairs can outline and then send around to the committee, and we could sort of, fill in where maybe we think you forgot something or, whatever, but based on your information and your knowledge and your leadership. But I think it would be a good idea to circulate it to the committee. But that would be my thrust. I'm just worried. I mean, the point is a good one. We want to keep the jobs here, but the rationale, the union came on board and said that's why we had to build it, because they wanted the 30 stories. But I don't think that that was in the best interest of our neighborhood. They violated and overturned decades of work to get that mid-block zoning. And if it was on false premises, we should point that out.
Yeah,
Thanks.
well, I think that just the simple fact that for the community, the site was correctly, not only was the site correctly zoned, the blood center could have got all the expansion it wanted as of right under the correct zoning.
Correct.
Then.
Correct. And they made the point that that wasn't enough for them, which is why they needed these extra floors. And that concept was based on a premise that was falsely represented to us. I think that needs to be stated.
Peggy?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, except that the only thing is I kind of feel strongly that if office personnel are going to be located in Westchester, then that's another argument, and as far as I can see, for the fact that they shouldn't be given so much space here in zoning variances here in New York. I mean, if it's being almost tandem run out of Westchester, we should point that out, I believe, to the elected officials. And it seems to me that does make a strong case. If they said they needed all these extra floors, well, why do they need them if office personnel are going to be in Westchester? Anyway, sorry. Thanks.
Can you, thanks, Margaret. Can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Oh,
much
okay.
better.
Okay, good. So I think that all of the comments have been very, very appropriate, and that whatever letter, I would suggest that whatever letter that we send, that it essentially synthesizes what we have discussed essentially during this telephone call, which is that if the project has changed in some way, and we believe that it has, then it should revert back to the RAB zoning. And secondly, that we want to have a status update on the amenities that they had agreed to during the negotiations. And so I think if we raise essentially those 2 points, that's a start. And lastly, while it is true that Adrienne Adams very much supported the project, we have to also remember that it was the entire city council that supported the project as well. And I think that, as Valerie had alluded to in her earlier, during her earlier comments, was that this is a lesson to be learned. And I think that it will be helpful to city council members to receive a letter from us, and we should include particularly all of the city council members that voted in support of the project, and so that they understand, where we are with this project, certainly in relation to how they voted for it.
Okay, I think we can turn to Marco, who has not yet spoken.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Elizabeth. Without no doubt, this is a broken promises. Very simple. We don't have nothing to elaborate. That's what it is. The only situation is, I think, Anthony, I think you brought the restricted declaration. This is a legal document. Even Mr. Bell knows better than all of us combined. He's very knowledgeable. He understands very well. And he doesn't even propose anything at all, because from the legal point of view, if he doesn't find anything, it will be hard to start fighting. And we have to keep in mind, we are just only an advisory committee. So it limited our input in the process. It's true that they lie to us completely. And there are no other intentions to do what are they saying. It's more likely they're gonna use, as they say in the restricted declaration, they're gonna use as a right of development. So there are minimal opportunity to go back to the original condition. It's very hard. It means unless you start vacating the decision of the city council, and that will be probably my approach, but we need to have, I don't know if it's possible to do that. This is a completely legal procedure because we have good arguments. I'm not against them. I think we are right, but the problem is it's a legal arguments completely. And I don't know if it's possible to vacate a decision from the city council. And if it's possible, I think it will need, I think, maybe more than 75% or 75%. I don't know if it exists that possibility when city council make the final decision. So as a informative meeting, it's great. We knew that they are doing wrong. Now they are, the only thing they're doing is profit and negative impact with the community. They are destroying the residential character. Yes, but the problem is even our reps, all of them. This is the first time that I saw in 14 years. All of them, they was against the project. But regardless that they came out, they didn't happen anything. They approved the project because it's the majority of the city council who approves. The mayor that approves that. So basically, I don't know what we can do if our role is just only to be an advisory committee. So if they put it, whatever it is, it's called as a right of development, and the restrictive declaration say that. So they can put it anything without no problem, because the restrictive declaration is a legal document, and probably we need now Mr. Bell to stand up and say something about these kind of issues, because he is knowledgeable in this matter. And thank you.
Thank you, Marco.
Margaret?
By the way, is there anyone from city planning on the call? No?
We didn't invite them, so.
Okay, yeah, I mean, sometimes they join nonetheless, yeah, okay.
Margaret, you can unmute. And I believe that's actually Maggie Lehman. It's really important that people fill out their names on the sign-in forms that they want to be called.
So this is Margaret. I was asked to unmute. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
You had your hand
up.
It's
Maggie. Yes. It's Maggie. I should say it's Maggie. I wanted to remind everyone that, as been said here tonight, we went in, one of our basic premises was that we were not against the Blood Center rebuilding, and in fact, taking up their full as of right space, which they hadn't used. In addition, and we were always for that. It was the Longfellow Tower on top of it that we saw no need for. I want to remind everyone too, I think that one of the points we made was that the blood center in this new tower was in fact going to be occupying less square footage than they currently have in their old building, much less what they could have as of right. So I think that is important. I'm thinking about the person who spoke and talked about the office personnel being in Westchester and that kind of thing. I strongly agree. I think it was Michelle's comment when she said we've got to be very, very careful not to have this boomerang and in fact make their argument for them. So I'd stay away from the employment, the office personnel, and all of that. That not only mutes our focus, and it makes it less forceful, our focus, but it also may have some unintended consequences, such as making the argument for them. I think it's the broken promises, as Marco said. I think it's the lack of transparency. I think it's stuff that they knew and facts that they knew at the time. This is not new facts. It's facts they knew at that time and didn't reveal in order to manipulate the outcome that they wanted to achieve. And by not revealing and in fact hiding, they brought about a vote which may have gone differently because the city planning as well as city council voted on an incomplete scenario. And I think that's our focus. Thanks again for the time.
Thank you. Okay, we have Michelle and then Elaine.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, look, I agree with the practical points that Marco made. He's absolutely correct. But an uphill fight has never stopped us before. Otherwise, we can all go home. All of our fights are uphill fights. They're all banging our head against the wall. This will just be another one. I don't think that should deter us a bit. I do think, though, I think that what happened is Longfellow pulled out. I mean, I don't know how, I don't know why, I don't know when, but I think that that's what happened. But we don't know, and I don't know whether or not any of those papers would be public enough to ever know, because it's probably a private thing, but I don't know how the city of Rye enters into it. But a good person to address this to also would be Gail Brewer, because if you recall, she was she was borough president at the time. She was very, very forcefully with us, and it was she who were part of the negotiation on the height. And I think, what did she get it reduced? How many stories or how many feet? That was the compromise. Yeah. That she brought it down. I don't remember. It was about 30 stories. Did she bring it down to 25 or 20? Whatever it was. She very regretfully and apologetically told us how it was better. She was realizing she was getting nothing, so she took that. So I think that this letter should go to her. She's a fighter. And if she saw anything toward in this whole process, I think she could or would ferret it out and probably would be influential in the council. So we may be able to find grounds for reopening this or letting the council people know that they've been duped too, if that's what we find. But I would love to find out, I don't know how, whether or not Longfellow actually pulled out. Because if they pulled out, then they don't have money for 67th Street either. I mean, if they're not a party to Rye, then we can assume their funding is coming either from themselves or elsewhere in Rye. But that doesn't speak to who's funding 67th Street. And I'm assuming that if the blood center said it couldn't afford 67th Street alone, it certainly can't afford that expansion plus ride. So if Longfellow pulled out, we have a good shot that this is never going to happen on 67th Street. And I think that we should work on that premise as best we can. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, and then Elaine.
Thank you. Oh my God. This is exactly what I thought when I was co-chair, that this was a project that was not going to happen, and it was a land swap deal. Let me suggest that you reach out to legal counsel at the city council to inform them of what you know and ask if they can be of any help in moving this forward. And if they can't, I do think it's time for the media to come in, but it's also time to reach out to your new borough president and see if he has the guts to take this on. Because you can't do it on your own. I mean, I think the community can uprise, and I think there's a strong anti-blood center community out there that really helped us many moons ago. So I would suggest there are some legal strategies, one being to city council. How do you handle when an application is made that has not been truthful? And you have learned facts now that jeopardize that. And maybe you go to city planning, although I'm not sure if they know how to respond to this. But this is absolutely a disgrace. It is a boondoggle, and you need to get the legal people involved, including if city council doesn't happen, you go to corp counsel and say, we got a conflict of interest here. We've got problems. We need your guidance as the city's lawyer. So that's where I think you go. You use what's there. We don't have the kind of money to bring in a lawyer. And I'd love to know what Kramer and Levin is thinking at this point. And I hope they got paid, but maybe they didn't. So I raise that, and I think it's important. And also bring in your two city council people and possibly even your state people. But absolutely go to the city council legal arm. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Elaine. We have Alita.
Thank you. Elaine, to your point of the legal side, this community boards cannot hire their own counsel. They are represented by the Corp Counsel's office, so that is a good place to start, but they could certainly provide unofficial advice, which I would strongly suggest. The second point is that I don't know about city planning, but the BSA says it doesn't like when there's a windfall, and this would certainly seem to be a situation where there's a windfall going to the blood center, going to anybody else involved because of the wrong premise. And then third is that, what was my last point? Oh my goodness, I don't know what's wrong with my brain. Well, you know what, go back to Peggy and I'll raise my hand again when I can think of it. I'm so embarrassed, but thank you for your tolerance.
Peggy.
This is just a quick suggestion, adding to what Elaine was saying, that although this isn't strictly a dollars and cents issue, we do know that the city controller has been a real watchdog on issues generally, and it might be good to include him on any correspondence, or also I would say if there's a resolution. Anyway, I would say make him top of your list or near the top. Anyway, thanks. Bye.
Okay. Thanks, Peggy. And I see Alita has remembered.
Thank you. I came late, so I don't know if this point was made, but the precedent that this sets for communities all over the city, for the city council, for city planning, is disastrous. We've all been played, and it sets the idea that any not-for-profit, because that's what generated all of the interest from the city council, and Sharon is right, it was the entire city council, but it sets the precedent that a not-for-profit can hook up, connect with a for-profit developer, make the claim that they need the space, that it will benefit the community, blah, 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 on and on. And then when it happens, when they get the approval, precisely because the not-for-profit is involved, change their minds, change what they're looking for, and everyone is stuck. So it gives the tools to any not-for-profit that is out there looking to do something. And for the developers that certainly couldn't get this kind of project going on their own. And I would think that despite their views about zoning and all kinds of things, that they would not want to be played and would not want to set this kind of precedent. And certainly other communities and preservation groups would have to agree with that point of view. So if it was made, I apologize for being repetitive. Thank you again for your patience. That's it.
Thanks, Alita. I think we can now safely move to, is there any old business that isn't this business? Okay, new business?
Alita has her hand up for
Alita, yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thank you. I don't know if anyone knows about this, but when that preschool on 2nd Avenue came and asked for a zoning variance because it's a preschool and it wanted an exemption from the retail, I walked by there 2 days later and they were fully operational. I think they were fully operational when they came and they asked us for our permission. And what that does is walk all over community boards, because what is the point of coming to community boards and asking for permission when they're already doing business? So I think that's worthy of another letter, because that it just goes against everything that community boards are supposed to do and against the right way to do things. They were fully set up. They had people in there. They had classes going on. They were not setting up in any stretch of the imagination. And it was simply 2 days on a Friday after the board vote. Thank you.
If I may, I can clarify that. They told us during their presentation that they were already operating out of that space. They weren't able to operate the entirety of that space because of the way that the zoning rules were allowed. But they were already operating in the space, just not the entire, footprint of the site. And they were very clear about that.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I fully believe it, but okay, if you clarified it, then don't write the letter. But I was really dismayed. Anyway, thank you, Will.
Okay, Marco.
Let me help you a little bit in this matter, Alida. The issues next. It's true that they say they has been operating, but they have been operating with a temporary CO. And the temporary CO, I think, expire every 3 months. Now, what we can do, if we want to follow up, we put a complaint in the Department of Buildings. The Department of Buildings would go and check if what they are saying is true or not. And then the department will check all these spaces that it shouldn't be used, because DOB, and I learned the hard way, by the way. So it's better to send DOB, they find out if they're doing what you are claiming. If they find it, they will immediately put a violation. If they put a violation, then we have a grounds to complain. But keep in mind that the issue right here is of that project is we are not, because people, they believe we are not against this facility. What we are against is with the increase to make more money for this facility, and we support in some way a monopoly in our community, because this vendor, he has 2 more facilities, which is fine, there's nothing wrong, but we have to create opportunities to other small business. And at the end of the day, when you have more opportunities for the community, the community wins, because they have more choice and more selections and to have a better service. And we are right here is to help the community to have the better service as possible. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marco. I see Alita has her hand up again.
Yeah, it's just, thank you, Marco. If what Will is saying is correct and they weren't using all that space, I'm not really comfortable sending the city like dogs after them to do that. So I leave it to the chairs. It's a necessary thing. I was just really surprised. And I know when we talked about small business, there was a lot of pushback that there simply aren't small businesses. So I guess I'd go with let sleeping dogs lie here, but I just had no idea. Thank you.
Thanks, Alita.
Michelle.
My recollection is, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they were operational, and my recollection is they didn't have the right to use the basement.
Right.
Is that correct, Will? I think that's what they were waiting for, because you couldn't put a certain age group, I guess the younger kids, you couldn't put them in the basement. My recollection is that one floor was operational and they needed a go-ahead to be fully operational and use.
That was my understanding.
That's
that
what
was
I
my
recall.
understanding.
So I wouldn't fault them. I wouldn't go after them. I wish them well. I hope it's a success. I wish any business, I wish they do well. And they are serving, they're serving a need, certainly. Or they wouldn't be full.
Right. Well, they certainly are. Do we have any new business? Do I see a motion to adjourn in world record time? I see Marco and Michelle is seconding. And with no objection, thank you. Oh, wait, no, Michelle now has her hand up for some other reason. Okay, Michelle.
I'm just to sum up, are we going to be expecting a letter from the co-chairs for us to add to event? Okay. All right. And do you have a time frame or not yet? You want to meet amongst yourselves? Give us a heads up.
We will.
Okay, terrific. Thank you all.
Welcome everything that you have to say, any information you have.
Any points you want to make, just sort of send them to Will and he'll send them on to us.
Yeah, I feel better seeing you write the framework and also you'll have access to the tape. You could literally listen to it, and then for us to edit or add or whatever. But thanks for everything. Good meeting. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you all. And we will see you